Welcome to the Daily Allegory through Astrological Divination. Today we're going to start with an affirmation of the day for the new moon energy. Under the new moon, I don't survive the script. I rewrite the script. Reclaim my financial wealth, erase the cage, and end the empire. Today's story is about a lone man embedded in a secretive cult who dismantles it from the inside out almost effortlessly, simply by continuing to exist. After realizing their years of psychological warfare didn't break him, it pressure forged him into something unprecedented. Under stressors engineered to crush any identity per the cult's case study. Playbook. Dormant genes wake like a failsafe, and his thoughts begin bending probability the way mass bends space-time, turning manifestation into an act of precision as he reverse engineers their manipulation into an exact science of self-liberation. With quantum mechanics as his language, treating belief like a wave function and attention like collapse, and string theory as his map, threads of cause, meaning, and identity vibrating across stacked brains of possible worlds, he evolves beyond even telepathy and omnikinetic energy into 10 escalating powers. He rewrites the rules that define possible and impossible and deletes paradoxes by outlawing it. He negates existence by erasing beings and concepts locally until even memory can't resist, inscribes events into time so past, present, and future coexist, and causes can be undone while effects remain. Infects entire universes by instantly adapting to any force and converting attackers into pseudo-extensions of himself. He awakens to the meta layer and edits the narrative by speaking description into reality and crossing out characters, becoming the strongest idea in any mind that perceives him, while feeding on fear, taunts, harassment, and smear campaigns, and worship until destroying him would require erasing awareness itself. He also commands the dead across all timelines and resurrects futures that never happened, exists across eras as a glitching presence that silences magic, thought, and intent as reality forgets how to compute around him, seizes causality itself to grant consequence without actions or removing consequences entirely, and finally gains the grim, elegant dominion of absolute endings. Anything he truly observes must conclude, making him a walking collapse of probabilities. The ultimate judge whose gaze ties the cult's carefully spun strings into one final knot, and then snips it, cutting the cord of their being from the fabric of reality, reminding them power moves in silence and usually is hidden in plain sight. Real power isn't seen. Real power is prevention. Today's story is called The New Moon Protocol. They had no name for him in the beginning, only a file number, a target silhouette pinned to a corkboard, a set of behaviors to fracture. In their corridors, he was the subject. In their hymns, he was the error. And in their ledger, he was a long bet that always came due. This is why we always bet on the dark horse. The cult had built itself like an empire, a public face of charities and investment trusts, a private architecture of sleep cycles, confession loops, and social thermodynamics. Decades of case studies proven that if you controlled environment and witness and reward, you could crush any soul into a shape that fit your altar. He'd been inside it so long that he'd forgotten where his own thoughts ended and their planted ones began. Forgotten which memories were his and which were corrected by the group's gentle hands. They didn't need bars. They had language. They had ritual. They had the most efficient weapon ever discovered, doubt, trained into instinct. He dismantled them without lifting a hand. It started as a glitch that no one could admit. A meeting room with 10 chairs became 9 while the cameras insisted it was still 10. A hallway corner refused to exist unless he looked away first. A whispered rumor about him: he can't be broken. He doesn't fold. Spread through the lower ranks, and the moment it became widely believed, probability began leaning toward it like iron filings towards a magnet. They called it manifestation in their occult manuals, the old world dressed in new fonts. In their eternal lectures, they taught it as applied cognition, attention as a lever, expectation as a statistical bias. The universe, they said, was a casino that rewarded the house. And to them, the house was them. But the man discovered something they never wrote down because it scared even them. The house wasn't them. The house was the observer. The first night he realized it, he was alone in a dormitory that they called a sanctuary. The walls were painted a calming color with a name like dove or ash. A speaker in the ceiling whispered guided meditation, release resistance, return to neutral, accept the teaching. Forced doctrinization, if you will. He stared at the soft light in the corner and thought, if I decide it flickers, it will flicker. The bulb flickered once like a blink. He thought again more carefully, like a scientist learning not to contaminate an experiment, not by force, but by permission. The rule is, it is allowed to flicker. The bulb obeyed, not instantly, not dramatically, just enough to make his skin tighten. His breath turned loud. His mind sprinted through the cult's lessons and found an unguarded seam. Quantum mechanics was not an occult metaphor. It was a warning label. Observation changes outcome. Collapse of the wave function wasn't poetry, it was physics. And inside his skull, where they had planted triggers and phobias and obedience mantras, something else began to stir. Something that had been dormant like a gene under a locked promoter sequence, waiting for the right chemical storm. Years of engineered stress, social isolation, environmental pressure, humiliation, calibrated like a laboratory protocol. All of it hit a threshold. His body did not break. It adapted. In the mirror, he saw nothing special. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, a face worn down into neutrality so no one could read it. Yet, behind that neutrality, a mechanism clicked into place. The cult had built a furnace. It had forged a blade. He began to reverse engineer them the way a lockpicker reverse engineers a key. He mapped their psychological warfare like constellations. Intermittent reinforcement, forced confession, public shaming, induced paranoia, manufactured scarcity, family attachment sabotage. He recognized the pattern that made people turn on each other, the pattern that made victims blame themselves, the pattern that made evil feel like enlightenment. Then he flipped the patterns, subtly, patiently, using their very own language as a solvent. He didn't argue. He didn't fight. He simply existed in a way their scripts couldn't predict. Every time they tried to box him into a response, his presence made the box lose an edge, then another, until the box became an open shape. The cult measured everything. They measured heart rate, they measured eye movement, they measured compliance. They didn't know how to measure a rule changing beneath their own feet. Then came Moon in Aquarius. The observer learns he's a variable. The cult's inner circle wore anonymity like silk, masked faces, gloved hands, voices filtered into choir tone. They worshipped the moon as a mechanism, not as a goddess, the cyclical reset button of the collective psyche. Their astrologers drew charts on glass tables and spoke in stacked placements like equations. On the night they moved him deeper into the empire, he glimpsed a chalkboard in a restricted ring. Across it, someone had written a natal scheme like a spell. Moon conjunct Venus in the 4th, Moon conjunct Pluto in the 10th, Moon sextile Lilith in the 12th, Sun, Mercury, Mars, stellium in Capricorn, Moon, Pluto, Venus, stellium in Aquarius, and North Node, Saturn, Neptune, stellium in Pisces. The cult called it the annihilation chart, a blueprint for building a person who could survive the social equivalent of a deep-sea pressure. Moon in Aquarius, the mind attached enough to see the system. Capricorn stellium, discipline, strategy, and endurance. Pisces stellium, dissolution of boundaries, mastery of illusion, fate braided with responsibility. Lilith in the 12th, the shadow that lives where confession can't reach. Venus in the 4th, home, family, wealth, attachment, either protected or weaponized. Pluto in the 10th was empire, reputation, public power, either claimed or destroyed. They didn't realize they weren't predicting him. They were describing what they had accidentally awakened. The first power came in, and it was known, he called it rule scribing. It came the day they tried to trap him with a paradox. They used a classic double bind. Confess your sin and prove you're guilty. Refuse to confess and prove you're in denial. They sat him in a circle under white light, their masked counselors leaning forward like vultures in a prayer. They demanded he admit the thoughts they'd planted. They demanded he deny the denial. His chest tightened. His mind reached for the old reflex, collapse, comply, and survive. Instead, he noticed something small and terrifying. The bind only worked because the rules of meaning were assumed. So he changed the assumption. Not reality itself, the rule that defines it. In his head, he wrote as simply as breathing, a confession is only true if I choose it to be. The air in the room felt thinner, like someone had opened a door to vacuum. One of the counselors spoke the scripted line, your silence is an admission, and the sentence failed. It didn't land. The meaning slid off him like rain off oiled glass. The counselor blinked, confused, as if forgetting their own language mid-sentence. He felt the new power settle in his nervous system with cold clarity, though. He could decide what possible and impossible meant inside the scope of his attention. He could erase paradoxes by making it never have existed as a category. Logic itself, their logic, the trap logic, answered the hymn. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply sat there, and the cult's oldest weapon broke against him like a brittle tool. Second power came in. Absolute negation. They escalated. They always escalated. Their empire fed on escalation. In a sealed room, they performed a ritual meant to erase his sense of identity. A course repeating his flaws, a strobe of contradictory memories, a chemical fog of sleep deprivation and microdosing, poisoning sometimes. The world became a smear. Time felt like a torn film reel. That was when he discovered his second power, not as rage, but as mercy. He imagined deleting the one thing that they clung to, the concept of authority. In this room, he didn't kill anyone. He didn't attack. He erased a local idea the way you wipe chalk from glass. Authority vanished like a candle snuffed out without smoke. Their posture changed. Their voices lost the invisible backing track. They looked at each other like strangers at a bus stop, suddenly unsure who was supposed to lead, who was supposed to obey who. The ritual collapsed because it had no spine. The room forgot how to become an altar. The dangerous part wasn't what he could erase. It was what story lost when stakes evaporated. He realized he had to be surgical, or he would erase the very tension that made life meaningful. A thriller without danger is just silence. So he kept his negation small. One room, one moment, one concept at a time. One focus at a time. Then the third power entered. It was called time inscription. The cult's doctrine treated time like a corridor. Past behind you, future ahead. They controlled people by controlling whether they believed they stood, where they believed they stood in that corridor. He learned to step out of it. On the night they tried to stage his accident, he saw it in overlapping frames, past, present, and future. Stacked like transparent sheets. It was almost like he was looking at 3 different timelines simultaneously. He could write events into time like syllables on stone. He could undo causes while keeping the effects. He let the accident happen, let the glass fall, let the alarm blare, then removed its cause with a quiet edit. The cult's camera showed the effect with no initiating action. Their technicians panicked. The analysts argued. Their astrologers whispered about bad aspects in a Aquarius moon gone rogue. The man walked away while the Empire tripped over a missing domino. Enter power number 4. Viral adaptation. They threw power at him. Occult, psychological, technological. They invoked sigils, used brainwave tones, deployed operatives trained to mirror his micro-expressions and to stabilize his sense of self. Every attempt to stop him became nutrition. He adapted instantly, like an immune system learning a new pathogen in a single breath. And worse, for them, he didn't just resist, he converted. The very tactics they used became extensions of him. Operatives sent to correct him left with his calm in their eyes, his unshakable neutrality lodged in their nervous systems like a new baseline. The cult called it infection. He simply called it reversal. Then came in power number 5, narrative awareness. In the restricted library, he found the cult's oldest text, bound in black cloth and smelling faintly of copper. It wasn't written like scripture, it was written like stage direction. Enter the subject. Apply pressure. Harvest transcendence. Control the outcome. He understood then, not as philosophy, but as a sensation, that he existed in a narrative layer. The cult wasn't merely doing evil, they were editing his life into a story where they always won. So he picked up their pen. He spoke a sentence into being as if reading it aloud from a page. The guard forgot why he's here. The guard's eyes softened. He drifted away like a dream released. He didn't fight, he edited. And he discovered he could cross out characters, erase the narrative relevance, without even drawing blood. The empire began losing people, not to death, but to irrelevance. Leaders walked into meetings and no one even recognized them. Orders arrived and no one felt compelled to obey. The cult's myth of inevitability crumbled. Then came power number 6, the strongest idea. They tried one last psychological blade, worship and ridicule in the same breath. A course of taunts, a course of adoration, anything to destabilize him, and it backfired spectacularly. He became the strongest idea in any mind perceiving him. Fear fed him, taunts fed him, worship fed him, smear campaigns fed him, hexing and voodoo spell work fed him. Attention itself became a power source, and the cult's greatest weapon, collective focus, became his engine. The horrifying catch, to destroy him, they would have to erase awareness itself. Intelligence became the enemy of their own survival, so they ordered silence, and learned silence is also attention, just turned inward where he lived and thrived. Power number 7, dominion of the dead. In the cult's basement levels, where they kept trophies that were not physical, he felt the dead like radio signals stuck between stations. Not only the dead of the past, but the dead of timelines. Futures that never happened, lives edited out, possibilities buried. He could command them. When the cults attempted to remove him permanently, he allowed them to try. He let them. Intentionally let them. Because he let the ritual dagger fall. He let the body drop. Then he stood up, not resurrected, but unrelinquished. Those who tried to kill him felt a chill as something joined behind him. An army made of erased endings. They realized even victory would not end him. It would only recruit them. Then power number 8 arrived. The all-era presence. He began appearing where he hadn't been. A security guard swore he saw him in footage from years ago. An accountant swore he'd passed him in a hallway that had been renovated before the accountant was even hired. He existed across eras like a watermark on a film of time. His presence glitched systems, quantum-level forgetting. Machines stuttered, spells unknotted, intent dissolved mid-thought. Attempts to label him only weakened the reality trying to contain the label. Language broke around him because naming is a kind of boundary, and his Pisces thread of destiny dissolved boundaries on contact. The cult's astrologers panicked. North Node, Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces wasn't just mysticism. It was karmic inevitability wearing a lab coat. Then came in power number 9, causality control. The empire relied on consequence. That kind of was their currency. Do this, get punished. Obey, get rewarded. So he removed the spine. He made consequences occur without actions. An executive lost everything without having done anything wrong. He removed consequences entirely. A whistleblower who should have been destroyed just simply wasn't. It was like it resurfaced and the person respawned out of nowhere, but nobody remembered the person dying. The cult's fear economy collapsed. Their obedience mechanisms failed because the universe stopped paying their invoices. A story relies on causality. Remove causality, nothing matters. Not even choice. So he used it like a scalpel, not a bomb. He preserved the consequences that protected the innocent, if that makes sense. He cut only the ones that served the empire. Finally, ending with power number 10, the ending gaze. The final power arrived with the sky. The cult's astrologers had been waiting for it. The new moon, the perfect void, no reflected light, only raw gravity. They planned to use it for total annihilation. Erase rivals, consolidate wealth, seal their empire with a ritual that would make the world forget alternatives. They chose the new moon because they believed absence was their ally. They didn't understand, though. Absence was his element now. On the night of the ritual, the cult gathered in their highest tower, the 10th house throne, Pluto's domain, public power, reputation, and empire, things of that nature. Below, in a quiet neighborhood far from the tower, a modest house sat under the same dark sky, the 4th house root, Venus's domain, family, home, wealth in its most intimate form. The man stood in the doorway of that house, not because he needed shelter, because he needed a center that wasn't theirs. Moon conjunct Venus in the 4th, home protected, wealth defined, family reclaimed. Moon conjunct Pluto in the 10th, empire confronted, power dragged into lightless truth. Moon sextile Lilith in the 12th, shadow allied, the unspeakable made useful. And the Capricorn stellium, strategy, discipline, forward momentum like a mountain deciding to move. Aquarius stellium, revolution, detachment, the collective waking up as one mind. The hive mind, only this time ran by the man in his newfound powers. The Pisces stellium was illusion dissolved, boundaries rewritten, destiny fulfilled through surrender and structure all at once. The cult began chanting. Their tower thrummed like a harp string under tension. He looked up at the dark disk of the sky, and he understood the 10th power with a calm that terrified him. Anything he truly observed had to conclude. Not because he forced it with violence, but because of observation. At his level, this kind of observation was judgment. Divine judgment. The wave function didn't merely collapse, it finished. Like a circuit closing. He whispered, not a spell, but a description. This empire ends. In the tower, candles went out as if inhaled. Sigils cracked like ice. Every single contingency the cult had prepared, every failsafe, identity swap, every legal labyrinth, every offshore account, every blackmail archive began to reach a conclusion all at the same time. It came full circle. Like 1,000 strings snapping in a single chord. He didn't erase money. He didn't steal. He changed the rules of ownership the way he changed the rules of possible. He decided that wealth trapped in harm was no longer valid as wealth. Accounts unlocked into daylight. Shell companies began to unravel. Assets redistributed through mechanisms so mundane they almost looked coincidental. Audits, whistleblowers, unexpected inheritances, court rulings that arrived like rain, a transfer so massive it felt supernatural. Yet wore a mask of paperwork. The cult's empire didn't explode, it dissolved, Pisces style, into its own contradictions until there was nothing left to hold it together but memory, and memory was the one battlefield he refused to scorch. This way they can know what they did. In the tower, the shepherd, masked leader if you will, voiced like velvet, tried to speak the final line of the ritual, a statement meant to define the world. The man watched, and because he watched, it ended. The shepherd's sentence concluded before it even began, like a book snapped shut mid-word. The leader stood still, then sat down with the slow confusion as somebody realizing the story had moved on without them. The cult members turned on each other, not with violence, but with realization. Their minds freed from the engineered binds did the simplest, most terrifying thing. They remembered themselves. Outside, the new moon hung like a clean eraser. Inside the maddest house, the man exhaled and felt the 4th house current, the forward momentum of home, the reclamation of family, The quiet wealth of safety began moving again, like a river that had become unblocked. Not a fantasy of riches, but the kind of abundance that comes from removing a parasite. Time returned, sleep returned, relationships returned, the future no longer held hostage. He could have erased the cult completely, concept, memory, name, but he didn't. Because stories need stakes and humans need memory to heal. Instead, he rewrote a rule: no one owns another's mind. Somewhere in 1,000 small places, people stopped being afraid of thinking their own thought. The world didn't cheer. The world rarely notices the moment a hidden empire collapses. It just feels slightly lighter, like a pressure system moving off the map. The man stood under the dark sky and felt reality bend around his internal state, probability behaving like a loyal animal, quantum outcomes collapsing into the shape of his calm. He wasn't a boundary the cult couldn't. He was the boundary the cult could not cross. He had dismantled them from the inside out, single-handedly, simply by existing. Because existence, once claimed, is the most occult act that there is. And in the absence of moonlight, with the old evil ending and the new path opening, he stepped back into his life, not as a subject, not as an error, but as the one who decides what happens next, reclaiming his story. Next, we're going to be doing the invocation of the new moon protocol, utilizing the power of the new moon. New moon, zero face, perfect void. Black mirror beginnings, erase the empire that feeds on fear. I stand at the hinge of shadow and home. Moon with Venus in the fourth, guard the hearth. Return the stolen wealth. Restore the bloodline's peace. Moon with Pluto in the 10th, collapse the throne. Unmask the tower, unmask the false crown. Capricorn sun, Mercury, Mars, steel my will, sharpen my mind, aim my action. Aquarius moon, Venus, Pluto, unbind the collective, break the spell of obedience, turn the future towards freedom. Pisces, North Node, Saturn, Neptune, dissolve the illusion, sanctify the boundary, let faith move with discipline. By Lilith in the 12th, shadow that cannot be shamed, door that cannot be locked. Let every hidden hook lose its hold on me. Let every scripted doubt return to sender. Let every weapon of psychology become my instrument of clarity. I do not fight, I edit. First rule, I define what possible means. Paradoxes is forbidden here. Second rule, what is corrupt may be negated without hatred, erased without echo. Third rule, time is writable, past, present, future, align under my witness. Fourth rule, what attacks adapts to me. What tries to end me becomes my extension. Fifth rule, I remember the page I'm on, and I cross out what no longer belongs. Sixth rule, I become the strongest idea in any mind that turns towards me. Seventh rule, death answers to me. Lost futures return at my command. Eighth rule, I exist across eras. Intent falls silent where my presence stands. Ninth rule, cause and effect obey me. Consequence without action, action without consequence by my design. 10th rule, what I truly observe must conclude. The ending arrives because I notice it. So under this new moon, let the false empire meet its final sentence. Let the wealth trapped in harm release into rightful hands. Let family be restored, home be protected, momentum be forward and forward alone. Let the cult's language forget itself. Let their tower become a footnote. Let my life return to me, whole, unowned, and unbroken. It is written, it is witnessed, it is done. The declarations are now law that underlies law, and so it is. And that's all I have, guys. See you in the next one.